If you thought being a product manager is a hard task, well, wait until you need to build a team of product managers. Hello, leaguers, and welcome to today's Practical Wednesday session, the place where talented PMs like you learn how to master the domain of product management. In this video, we are going to teach you how to build a team that is set around shared values and work culture, so your game won't be focused on pace but on delivery. If this is the first time we're meeting, so nice to meet you. My name is Moriya Kassis. I'm the founder and general manager of Product League. And what we do is helping you to become the best product manager you can be. We're a mentoring program for product managers by product managers. And you are lucky because these days are the last days to apply for our next batch, the 6th batch. I'm serious. These are like literally the last days. So if you are ready to level up your game, your product management game. So make sure to follow the links in the comments and let's chat. We want to help you and see if you are a product management material for us, if you're going to conquer the world, and if you are a leaguer to be. So it's great meeting you. And today, Corinna Stukan, VP Product at Rome, is here to discuss with us this mega challenge of building a product team. Here are some of the topics that we are going to discuss. First is how to deal with the challenges that come with the first hirings, right? The first hires, how to build a solid foundation, how to lead to scale, how to do those things even when you're just starting out. The second thing is how to evangelize product management within your organization. Stakeholders management is always such a big task. And last but not least, how to strive even on the hard times, because sometimes you're gonna have to pave your path in the dark, and Corinna is here to help you better understanding how to do that. And I am so happy to bring this awesome lady to the stage. Corinna, it's a pleasure having you here with us.
Hi, Moriya. Thanks so much for having me.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here with us. And guys, just so you know how much respect and love Corinna has, not only for you, but for this domain of product management. So be aware that it's 5 a.m. in New Zealand right now. So it's much appreciated that you are here with us. And we love your dedication to this domain and your spirit. And it's just an amazing opportunity to learn from you. And guys, just so you know why I am so excited about having Corinna here with us. So she's a product go-getter. That's correct. VP product at Rome, and overall a product enthusiast and amazing person. Over the past 4 years, Corinna has built a product team at Rome from 0 to 15 product managers and counting. With past professional life, both as a developer and designer, Corinna strives to bring a systematic yet innovative approach to her work, to all of us works, if to be correct here. You can find her thoughts about product management on Substack, where her words as her thoughts in real life will be straight aligned like the German New Zealander she is. And this is just a fantastic way for the guys to know a little bit about you, because I know it will get them hungry to know more about you. And also, I want the guys to know, and the guys in the audience to know, that we are open for questions, right? We want to hear from them. So guys, you have an amazing opportunity to share your thoughts and challenges and everything that is on your mind and heart when it comes to building a product team with Corinna, and get her thoughts and her feedback and learn from her experience. Don't miss out on this amazing opportunity. Anything else that we should add before we're diving right in?
I know, I'm ready to get started.
That's the spirit. Very happy to have you here with us and can't wait to learn from you. So the stage is all yours.
Oh, thanks, Maria, for the lovely introduction, really. I'm so excited to be here today, despite the time. And I was actually also so happy that Maria asked me to present on this topic, because we sometimes don't stop enough and reflect back. And I think this was just a really great opportunity for me to do exactly that and kind of reflect on my last 4 years, 4 or 5 years at Rome, building the team. So I wanted to share just a little bit more about myself and what I'm doing at Rome, because it will give you a bit more context, I think, for some of the stories I'll be telling you today. So this is me in not working from home clothes. A VP of product at Rome. Rome is a digital consultancy. We have offices in New Zealand and in Australia, and we work with a large range of well-funded startups through to enterprise clients across the globe to help them with digital innovation and building digital products and businesses. And I say businesses because we don't just like to build and design pretty looking apps. We really come in at the early stage and we help from, the ideation phase through to the product strategy, and then through to designing and building and launching those products for our clients. I started at Rome about 5 years ago when we were about 24 people, and now we're actually over 120 across those two studios. And yeah, I was the first PM. So when I joined, everyone was either a very talented designer or a very, very talented developer. And everyone kind of looked at me, you're not coding, you're not designing, what do you do? So it's definitely been a good challenging journey, I think. And since then, I was obviously the PM by myself for a while, and then over the last roughly 4 years, I've grown the product management team to currently 15 PMs and still hiring at the moment, actually. So through Rome, I worked with a large range of different clients. And I always say I have this like 10x accelerator of getting experience through that, which has been amazing because I got to work with so many different clients in industries. So some of the examples being Commonwealth Bank Australia, which is a huge bank over here, ASB Bank, which is owned by them, worked with eBay before, Fletcher Building, which is a large construction company over here in Asia Pacific. So a really wide range of B2B and B2C products I got to work on over the last few years. And then, as Moriya mentioned, I love writing as well. I'll share my link later if you want to hear, some more thoughts on some of the things we're talking about today. Okay, so I want this talk, to be really honest, I think it's easy when looking back over the last 5 years, it's really easy to use kind of hindsight knowledge. And I think there were a few things that obviously, I did well and that got me here, but there were also some things that I think I could have done better. And so I want to share my learnings really from that today. And funnily, this is perfect timing, really. I'm just going through building a second team at the moment. I'm kind of 2 months in now that the product management team is, in great shape, and I have a couple people I can start to lean on. I got also tasked on the side to build a mini, what I call a growth team, so a team of customer success, sales, marketing, growth marketing, to help grow a product. So that's kind of just a couple months in, and I'm just kind of doing it for the second time again, which is just really amazing. I'm really grateful to have this opportunity because it is a really exciting journey. And then secondly, I do want this to be as relevant as possible for you guys. And so I would like to hear, if you have grown a team or led an existing team, or if you're about to go on this journey, what are your biggest challenges that you're facing? I would love if you could add those things to the comments. And please also keep adding to the comments as we go through this presentation, because I might talk about some things that might spark some more ideas in you or some more challenges that you can think of. And then hopefully by the end of it, I might have talked about some of those challenges already through my slides, but we obviously also want to address any other topics and challenges that you might have thrown into the comments or in the questions. So yeah, so many learnings really. And I was thinking, how should I organize all of this? And I thought back to one of the most influential books I've read from Julie Zhou, hope I'm saying this right. She was the VP of design at Facebook previously. She wrote a fantastic book, Making of a Manager, that kind of talks about the key areas of leading people. And she talks about the 3 areas being purpose, people, and process. And so I wanted to use these 3 areas to kind of organize my learnings. Again, there's so much in this topic that I didn't know where to start, but this is kind of my way of organizing all these thoughts. And then hopefully we'll get to everything else in the Q&A. Okay, so yeah, these will be the areas we'll talk about today. We'll talk about purpose. We cannot talk about leading a team without talking about purpose. And I want to share how our purpose evolved over time, but I also want to talk about resilience and grit here a little bit, because looking back, actually, this was, I think, the hardest part actually for me is sometimes, keeping myself motivated, and sometimes progress is slow. And so you really have to keep yourself going. So we'll spend a bit of time on that. Secondly, I want to talk about the people side. Who did I hire when? What were the challenges? And then thirdly, we'll be talking about process. I grew up in Germany, so I do love a good process. And I think there are a lot of tips that I can share that will really help you, especially once you get to that scaling stage. Okay, starting with purpose. I'm actually going to start with a bit more of a personal story here, because it had a huge impact on me personally, but also into my professional life, really. And there are a lot of similarities I could actually see from this time. So this is me at 11 years old. I was aspiring to become a professional figure skater. And obviously, I'm talking to you guys about building product management team at 5 a.m. local time. So my career didn't quite pan out. But again, there is so much I kind of took from this time, I think, into what I do today. So what lots of people don't know is, figure skating is really, really demanding, and you don't just train on the ice. So I had ice training perhaps 6 times a week, but then you also have to do a lot of off-ice training. So you actually have to, do a lot of core training, strength training, conditioning. You have to do ballet and dancing classes to improve your posture and your coordination. So it's a pretty intense schedule. So you have multiple workout sessions on and off ice a day. And I did that for 10 years. And I often ask myself, looking back, why did I do this to myself, really? And I think the answer was, it was the time of, if there are any US folks here, you might remember Michelle Kwan. In Germany, we had Katharina Witt back then, and they were just these amazing women who went on the ice and, performed and inspired and moved people through their performances. And that's what I was aspiring to be as well. I wanted to be that person as well. And I had clear goals, it was very structured. You have your local competitions, then you move up to senior, then you can go to the more international competitions. So I had a really clear purpose, and I also had really clear goals on how to get there. And I think, looking back, there's no other way I would have gone through this routine every day for 10 years if I didn't have that. What I didn't realize for a long time as well is skating was actually, oh, sorry, I pressed the button. Skating is actually really similar to being a leader. You go on the ice rink, you're completely by yourself, everyone's watching you, and everyone can see you make mistakes. And you're constantly facing challenges, you have to try to motivate yourself. So what I learned from it really is, firstly, the importance of purpose and goals, because that keeps you going. And secondly, I think it really taught me that, resilience and grit are things that really pay off if you stick through the hard times in the torturous routine. So I want to share some tips with you guys today on, how to keep going, really, because you'll need a lot of that building a team. So let's break it down quickly. What do I mean when I talk about resilience? Resilience is the ability to bounce back after adversity or disappointment. So resilience for me was falling on a jump over and over again, but I kept trying until I landed that jump. And then today, for me, resilience is explaining the value of product management over and over again, even if people don't instantly get it, but you just keep trying until you succeed with it. And then on the other side, but kind of related to this, of course, is grit. And I like this definition of grit a lot. Grit being the tendency to sustain interest and effort towards long-term goals, which is often associated with self-control and also deferring short-term gratification. And I love this last part, especially of deferring short-term gratification, because I think we do live in a world where we hear all these success stories of people getting rich quick or building this business from zero to hundreds of millions of revenue per year in like a year. And I think what people often don't realize is the time and hard work that it actually got them there in the first place. Maybe they had 3 other businesses that failed before and they used all these learnings. So really a lot of people, they've worked on these things for a long time to get there, and they just didn't get distracted. And especially when things get hard, sometimes our minds tend to look for easier paths. It's a really natural thing to do. So I just really encourage you to always keep your long-term goals in mind, because I think the parts, looking back, where I learned the most in my journey was really the parts where, it was maybe, but really the hardest and sometimes also the boring parts where you just kind of have to stick through. So for me in the early days, grit was, often not going to kids' birthday parties because I had a skating competition on the weekend. And today it is about not getting distracted by maybe too good to be true PM roles at some fancy startups while you may be having a hard day or hard time building a team. There's actually a great TED talk from many years ago from Angela Duckworth that she talks about grit and how this is a leading indicator for success. And it's a really great TED talk. I can highly recommend watching it if you want to learn more about it. But really, so going back to the purpose, you need a reason for all of this, right? No one is just resilient for the sake of it. So this is how I like to put it. Resilience and grit don't exist without having clear goals and purpose. You really need a reason to get through challenging times. And your purpose doesn't have to be that grand, though. In fact, for me, becoming the next Michelle Kwan probably wasn't the most sustainable goal. In fact, I had to quit skating when I was 14 because at that young age, I already had so many overuse injuries that I couldn't keep going anymore. So since then, I've I personally found more realistic goals and purposes work better for me. So that's kind of wanted to share from that story. And ultimately, I think people want to have an impact. And so your purpose, can be smaller and it can evolve as well. And that's actually what I wanted to share, bringing it back to my product management team that I've built over the last few years. I wanted to share over the next slides kind of how our purpose started and how it also evolved over time together with our role. So when I just joined Rome, like I said before, we were just about 24, 25 people. And what I realized when I joined was the biggest pain at that time for those teams were actually delivery. I remember our tech lead was writing development tickets for everyone, was doing the sprint planning sessions, was doing the timelines, and it was really not the best use of his time. So I kind of identified that as the first area where, all right, this is where I can get stuck in, this is where I can really help the teams. And I try to really show, not tell, how I can help the teams and build trust this way. And I mean this in the nicest way possible, but really back then my role was to be a backlog manager. So with the purpose of enabling product teams to deliver based on business priorities. And this is actually still a key part of PMs today, even though it's not the most glamorous part. But really, you need to empower your teams to be able to do their job. And this is really what I hired to at the very start. I was focusing on the delivery part first because this is where I was able to add a lot of value. But we'll talk about the hiring soon. But then as product management in general, and also us product managers at Rome matured over time, we actually saw another problem. We now saw that businesses were making these sometimes random prioritization of features because of someone's opinion or of what the competitors are doing. So we had to kind of evolve our purpose, right? Not just deliver based on business priorities. We didn't want to keep sitting back and see businesses make decisions that are really far away removed from the customer. So our new purpose was to become real product managers, right? We needed to educate the business on what to build and why, and drive both discovery and delivery. We really wanted to help them build the right things. And I think this is roughly where we are today. So it's been really great actually to see the progression from backlog manager to product manager. But it would be boring if we would just stop there. So I'm currently working on a definition of our newest purpose, like our next purpose really. Because now we have this problem that a lot of companies are now focusing on the end customer, and a lot of companies build beautiful products. And there's so much choice for end consumers out there now to choose from. So what we really need to get better at is not just build great products, but also build successful and viable businesses. So we need to add another dimension into our toolkit, in my opinion. And we need to become what I like to call product operators, right? So we will need to help businesses not only build successful products, but also drive real business results. And we've been talking about, the importance of outcomes over outputs for quite some time actually in product management. And I think this just takes this concept and evolves it even further. And I truly believe we will need to move towards this direction. So what that will mean is, we as product manager will need to have more responsibility over the product as a business, truly focusing on business outcomes by driving not only the product itself, but also areas such as growth, support, sales, operations, you name it. And I love using the word operator because it really implies this expectation of the PM to become more operational as well. And I think it's really an exciting future actually for us, and it's exciting that our purpose and role always keeps evolving. So yeah, in short, our new purpose will be to drive successful businesses. But I mean, this is actually a whole talk in itself, and I did some writing on this recently, which I'm happy to share if you're more interested in that. But going back to talking about purpose, I hope this helps you understand what purpose meant for us, what I mean when I say, our purpose evolved, and we didn't start with this grand purpose, even though one of the first books I actually read was inspired by Marty Kagan's, which is an amazing read really to get started. So I knew what I wanted the product managers to be like in the end, but I knew it would take time to get there. And to get there, you really need great resilience. So a few more tips on that that I wanted to share before we dive into some of the more mechanics on who did I hire when and what were the processes. Because really, I cannot stress it enough. This was the hardest part for me. So I hope this will be helpful for some of you. So firstly, a strong shared purpose is really what will keep you and the team going. And I think this is actually an area that I could have done a better job at the early days, especially. I think I had it figured out. I had the purpose figured out for myself, but I don't think I did a good enough job sharing that with everyone else. And in fact, I had higher churn in the early days from my early members in the team than I have now. And there are many factors to it, but I think this was definitely one of them. So that's why I kind of bolded that, it needs to be a shared purpose. Don't just define it for yourself to keep yourself going. Think about how to share it effectively with the team as well. What also helped me was avoiding to create stories and, trying my best to be more clinical. So I have a story on this. When I started at Rome, my first month, my boss just hired me to work on this product with this client, and that client actually said, you know what, we know the requirements, and we can do the project management, and we don't need a product manager. We just take the developers and the designers. Thank you very much. Yeah, so this was obviously not a great look for me and not a great start. It was quite a blow for me, and it was really frustrating to just hear that, to be honest. So, and I think what happens is often when we are faced with these challenging situations and uncertainty, our brains like to make up stories, right? So it was really easy for me to say something like, oh, Rome's clients, like, they don't see the value in product management, or oh, no one will see value in me, like, what am I even doing here? And even though it was really frustrating, I tried my best to be, again, clinical about this, right? Is this an isolated case? Is this one client, or is this a wider pattern? Luckily, this was, that one particular client, and the next client that came along actually saw the value in product management or in me a lot earlier, which was great. So I didn't create a story of that challenge, and I realized it was an isolated case. However, if it is a pattern, really, again, be clinical. What can I do, or what actions can I take from here to change that pattern? The next one helps me on a personal level a lot, actually. I like to remember that challenges and emotions, especially frustrating emotions, are mostly temporary. So what you can do sometimes is just look through your old Slack messages or emails, or even your notes from a year ago, and you realize sometimes these moments, or these situations that you find really frustrating and really hard, they passed. So I like to remind myself that, a lot of my frustrations and those moments, they will pass. They're only mostly temporary. And you might be familiar with the notion of a growth versus a fixed mindset, which I personally, it really resonates with me. It's a concept from Carol Dweck. She talks about a fixed mindset being, someone who kind of labels themselves, saying things like, oh, I'm not analytical, or I don't have resilience. And they kind of believe this is a fixed belief that they have, versus a growth mindset being someone who's actually, open to learning new things, and open to not being good at something at the start, but knowing that our brains are actually really malleable, and there are a lot of things we're not simply born with, but we can learn if we put enough effort in it. And I really, really like this notion. I think it's a really motivating thought for me to know that, for example, at the start, I wasn't the best or the most experienced at creating frameworks for better discovery processes. And so I learned a lot of that kind of, I did a lot of reading and upskilling, and I put a lot of effort into it until I got better at it. So that's a really, I think, a motivating thought, and a good mindset to have, in my opinion, is a growth mindset. And then lastly, I wanted to share too, it sounds so simple, but it is really key. Keep showing up, and keep showing up in the arena every day. And I took that wording, in the arena, from one of my favorite speakers or researchers, Brené Brown. She has a great Netflix special on at the moment, actually, that I highly recommend you watching. She talks about leadership and courage and vulnerability. And she uses that notion of stepping into the arena. That's what takes real courage. You don't know the outcomes. Everyone can watch you. Which kind of reminded me a little bit of the skating rink. You're on this big ice rink by yourself. Everyone is watching you. Everyone can see you fall and make mistakes. And I think it's really similar being in any sort of leadership position. It's scary sometimes. And there were definitely many moments where I didn't know whether I am 100% on the right path. And it doesn't just stop after a few years. I just had that recently, right? We now just have different problems or different challenges. Now I have to think about how do we scale the team better? We have, really big products these days and really big product teams. And the product manager was getting really stretched doing everything from discovery and delivery themselves, and now they have to think about the business outcomes as well, with more focus. So we now have the challenge of figuring out how do we scale it, and that's another whole topic. I don't want to get into it, but yeah. So you don't always know 100%. Am I on the right path? And that's never going to go away. But that's okay. You just have to get out there in the arena and be seen and make mistakes if needed. But the key is really to keep showing up every day in the arena and keep chipping away at your goals. Because I mean, ultimately, and this is kind of really the theme from the presentation, and something that I hope will stick with you, is that you're really, really in it for the long run. Okay, over to the people side of things. I wanted to share, who I hired when, how I went about it, and again, share some hopefully practical tips that might help some of you. So let's look at the evolution of our role again. Our first purpose was to help teams deliver based on business priorities, right? And imagine I would have hired like the superstar product evangelist who does business models and product strategy and wants to do all the good things at the very start. I think that person would have been, would have felt really underutilized and might have also rubbed off people the wrong way. And that wouldn't have worked out. That person might have left very, very soon. It might be a different case, keeping in mind at Rome, we were only 24 people. So it was overall, a very small, very hands-on company at that stage. Well, we still are very hands-on, nothing changed, but it wasn't like a big enterprise. I read recently that Shopify, for example, didn't hire the first PM after they had over 100 people already, mostly engineers and designers, I'm assuming, which is crazy. In that case, you probably want to bring some of the big guns in a bit earlier who can do a lot of product evangelism and do a lot of knowledge sharing. But I think what really worked for us and for the size of the company and for the overall maturity of the company back then was to hire someone based on the current purpose, right? Someone who can stuck in, get stuff done, and help the teams really deliver on their business priorities. So basically, I tried to find people who fit the current purpose, but at the same time also evolve the team with me. And this really leads me to the first step. Be strategic about who you hire and hire to your purpose and goals. It sounds like an obvious one, but it's really hard to do in practice. There were a lot of PMs that I talked to over the years who I really liked, and I thought they were fantastic product managers, but they were simply not what we were looking for at that time. And they might have been, might have felt frustrated and churned right away. So I wanted to avoid just getting more PMs and overshooting potentially as well. So I tried to get people who are real doers and wanted to get real stuck into delivery first. However, as I said, you still want to advance your team. So there is really this fine balance of finding someone to your current purpose, but also someone who helps you evolve the team. So you still need to think about, what is your deficit within your team or within your own skill set as well. Don't just hire more people who are just exactly like you, which I think is really good general hiring advice as well, but especially critical in that first early stage. I think I could have actually sped up the evolution I talked about from just focusing on delivery to both discovery and delivery. I think if I would have hired a couple people a bit earlier who had stronger discovery experience, I think I could have sped up this journey. But again, hindsight is such a beautiful thing, right? So again, it's a fine balance, finding people who can advance your team, but also fit your current purpose and don't feel underutilized. The next one is really dear to me, really, because especially as a PM, we don't produce code, we don't produce designs, and I feel like we sometimes have to work extra hard to prove our value in an organization. So I recommend, especially in the early stage, to focus on doers to build trust in your organization. Because sometimes I see startups that have like 7 people and they have all these VPs and all these heads of, but there's no people to manage at this stage, right? And this is also not the route I took. I started as a product manager, and only once I started to actually hire people into my team, and thankfully, I was given the trust to do that myself, then I kind of moved up to, with the fancy titles, which I didn't have that at the start. And I think it was a good thing, actually. So if you are in the startup stage, from my experience and from what I've observed, you can obviously hire that VP head of level, but they really need to be prepared to do the doing for a while, right? To build that trust in the organization. And if you have those people skills, fantastic. You can then go on and grow the team and hire people and manage people. Or you obviously start with, a normal product manager who's great at managing products over people, and just make it clear or set the expectation from the start that as you grow, you might want to add, a VP or head of level, because otherwise this could be a really really bad moment where maybe that person had different expectations. So it's really important, I think, to make that quite clear, because that first PM in your organization is such a critical role to keep. And then especially, in the early days with your early hires, you have to be so deliberate, with the culture you're creating. I really noticed that now that I have a larger team and we have this kind of established culture, and new people join and they just slot in quite nicely, and they kind of just absorb the culture from everyone else around them, right? Because it is such an established culture and a larger team. But you don't have that at the very start. You don't have a culture, or you're still in the process of building it. And your actions and also the first hires you add to the team are such a crucial part of forming that culture. And it's a lot harder to change that culture later on. My colleague, the VP of design at Rome, actually shared some really nice thoughts on this just this week, kind of on an unrelated talk, which was really nice. Don't be fooled by your cool flat structure, especially in the early days, because you're still a leader and people still look up to you and they watch every action you take as a leader. So despite, that flat structure you might have. So again, your actions, as well as the first people you hire, are super critical for building that culture. My biggest fear was always, being seen as like overhead, or the product manager as being someone who kind of stands above the team and just tells everyone what to do and doesn't really get stuck in. And I really wanted to find PMs in the early days who just have the right mindset and who want to get stuck in and empower the teams and not stand in the way in any way. So that's what I focused on with my first hires, is really PMs with that right mindset. And I think that created a really nice culture that I can still see today. I think, everyone kind of sees in the company how hard the PMs are working, and they really want to help, and they're on the side of the team. They're in it with them. And then lastly, on culture, I also highly recommend to, build a culture that is actually sustainable. Remember, you're not building a team for just the next 3 months. So for example, if you start off with a culture where you're going a million miles an hour and you expect everyone to work late nights and weekends, this is not going to be sustainable in the long term. And I'm really big on that because, yeah, remember, you are in it for the long run. Okay, process. Let's talk about that. And this is more of some of the tactical things, but again, especially crucial, after you had your first hires and you're now in the stage of growing and scaling your team. And I want to start with this lovely illustration, which is from the book I mentioned at the start, Making of a Manager. You can see on the left, you have this kind of classic annual performance review where your manager tells you, here's how you've been doing for the past year. And then on the right is what you should aspire to with the one-on-ones you have with your team members. And it sounds more like this. Can I share some feedback for you from that meeting this morning? So there's a clear difference between those two. And again, especially in the early days, you might get fooled because you think you're working so closely together. It's only 3 of you in the PM team and you talk every day anyway. So it's really easy to think, oh, I don't need those one-on-ones that frequently. We're chatting every day anyway. And I think this is a big mistake. And I've made that myself, actually. In retrospect, I think I should have really invested in more frequent and more effective one-on-ones, really from day one. You really need to ask your people, not just a chat about your projects that you have in the day-to-day, but really asking them questions like, are you enjoying your role? What do you find challenging? And then, of course, share regular feedback with them because they're here to grow and they want your feedback. So that was a huge learning for me. And that's the first tip I want to give you when it comes to, processes or things you should implement from day one. Invest in effective one-on-ones from the very start. So have them every 1 to 2 weeks, at the very least. Have a set agenda. Ask your reports to come prepared with things they're struggling with, things they need help with, and prepare points yourself, feedback points that you want to share with them on a regular basis. And it might feel a little bit overkill at the start, but really believe me, it is so worth it. Because the number one reason people leave is, not the projects, but often just the, they didn't feel valued or they didn't feel supported or they didn't feel like they were growing enough. So those are really the things you need to find out in those one-on-ones. And those are not things you find out in, when you sit next to them on a desk and you talk about project stuff. Okay. And then on a similar note, don't just focus on the technical skills only. And I definitely realized that over the years as well. I don't have to be the best PM. I don't need to know all the tools and all the processes and have answers to everything. You need to be competent in your area that you're leading, of course. But the biggest challenges I have seen in the team with my team members were human challenges. There were things like, again, they didn't feel supported enough. They didn't feel like they were growing enough. They felt overloaded, maybe. So be there to support your team, not just from the technical point of view and from this product management skills point of view, but also just be there for them. The next one I find, again, especially relevant for PMs, because we don't actually have, the luxury of maybe having a couple more developers in the team that we can bounce ideas off with. Usually we're by ourselves. We're the only PM on one product team. So it can feel a little bit lonely sometimes. And so I think you need to really make sure that your PMs feel supported in the team with, talking to everyone, to all the other PMs, to share knowledge, to share challenges, and kind of have that exchange going. Now we actually have a bi-weekly session that we've been running for a while where every 2 weeks, one of the PMs shares, a challenge or a piece of work that they've been working on recently, and kind of gets feedback from the team, and any ideas they might have or any feedback they could share on it, or if they've gone through something similar. And I think it's a really valuable session that I actually really enjoy. It's one of our key sessions really today. And I wish I would have actually introduced this one earlier as well, because it's really helping, I think, for them to feel supported. Before we had the first few PMs join my team, there was obviously this challenge for me personally. I was by myself, so there was no one to have these knowledge sharing sessions with. So I had to kind of find people in a similar stage through meetups, which kind of worked for me. Sometimes you do find those awesome people who can become mentors, but what actually really worked for me for those really specific challenges I was facing, and I think it's a thing that is often overlooked, I found people who are in similar positions within the company, because they actually had really good insights. They know the company culture, they know the processes, they know the structure. So it actually really helped me talking to, for example, when I started interviewing, I haven't done interviews before, so I didn't know how many interviews should I do. Should I send questions first, or do I meet them in person right away? So I went over to the person who does the interviews for the engineering team, and then I've asked them how they do it. And so I learned a lot from that. And I think it was really nice because, again, they know your company really well. So to wrap this one up, facilitate knowledge sharing within your team. And while you're by yourself, get creative, find good mentors through mentorship programs, for example, or meetups, or also get creative on where else you can find advice. The next one is a really German thing for me to say, of course, but I really, really do believe in it. Set up structure and documentation for future scale. And obviously, it's going to be a lighter process and lighter structure at the start, and that's fine. But again, if you're small, it's really easy to think, oh, you can just wing it. And I really made sure from the start that everything we do, we were obviously focused on delivery back then. We used documented processes and templates for everything. And it really helped us as we were growing as a team. Because newbies would join and they would just simply reuse those templates. And I think it really helped us grow with fewer growing pains that I see other teams go through. And this really touches on the wider theme. I think, it's easy to think we're small, we're working so closely together anyway. We don't need one-on-ones. We don't need knowledge sharing sessions. We don't need any of that. We're just here to get stuff done. And again, from my experience, this is not the right way of thinking, because once you are at the stage of growing, and some companies, some teams grow a lot faster than we have, there's absolutely no time to catch up on these things. So think about it and set yourself up for future scale. As your team grows, also think about reducing your individual contributor contributions, especially as your team grows to 5 or more. You now really have a full-time product people leadership role. And it was really hard for me as well, because I love product management. I love building products and being hands-on. So I had to kind of force myself to let go a bit, but that's okay. So yeah, as your team is growing to 4 or 5 people, really dial back on those projects or products that you're running yourself. I can only recommend that, because if you are doing those team sessions, one-on-ones, all of that, you will need all of that time. And lastly, I recommend to define team principles to enable autonomous decision-making. At the start, you'll be really involved probably in a lot of day-to-day decisions, but just remember, it's not always going to be that way. And so we need to hire people who, we can enable to make their own decisions and have ownership over their products as soon as possible, especially if you are planning to grow pretty quickly. And that's actually one of the main learnings I've had, which I'm now using for my growth team that I mentioned at the start. And so I recently sat down and actually defined some of those guidelines on how I want us to operate in that growth team. So one example for that is, a guideline around having a culture of experimentation and the data mindset, because I don't want to become, and I'm already feeling it, I'm already becoming a bottleneck to a lot of decisions. So I want to set some guidelines really next to say, if you have an idea, go for it. We want experiments. Just make sure you measure it and you can tell whether it worked or not. So that's one of those guidelines, that I hope will really work for us to enable our people to make their own decisions and not, wait for me to always be there for every step. All right, final 2 cents, or more like 3 cents. It's kind of 3 final statements that I wanted to wrap this part up with. You might have noticed I actually didn't talk that much about evangelizing the importance of product management. And you might have noticed by now that it wasn't a huge part of my strategy because we were such an early stage company at that stage. I didn't want to swing big speeches and evangelize and then hope people would come to me for advice. For me, what really worked was getting stuck in. Having said that, it does need to be a part of it. But my advice is really, don't just focus on evangelizing to the top, but also focus on building trust and finding advocates within the teams, because they can actually help you spread the word, right? You need to make sure you get involved in the right conversations, in the right meetings. So you need to find support not only from the top. Luckily, I was hired as a product manager. I had the mandate to introduce this. So I had that support, but I really needed to build trust in the team, and they can spread the word for you. In terms of wider stakeholders, what has, however, worked for me when I did have to convince them of the value of product management is not preaching to them, but really just doing certain things as a suggestion, and then they often adopt it as a standard process. So for example, earlier this year, I felt like we weren't doing enough with product analytics. We didn't have a structured approach, and our clients weren't focusing on product analytics enough. So I introduced this framework to the product management team, of how to define the key metrics, what to track. And then I told the PMs to simply do it as an exercise, even by themselves, and then suggest it to their clients and say, hey, look, I've done this piece of work. What do you think about it? And they loved it. And then it starts to become this standard part of your process. And now this is what you do. So again, my advice is show, not tell. And then really going back to team culture, it's not a product. You can't quickly pivot on it. And so even though it's early days, you're still figuring things out. Remember, you're here to set the foundation, and it's a lot harder to change your culture later on. And lastly, you really, really, really need to be in love with not just the outcome, but also the process of building a new team and capability. Because good things really take time, and change takes time, and you won't see the results instantly. I think sometimes people want the outcome of, I've built a company or I've built a team, but they're not always prepared to actually get through the process and put in the work to get there, and accept the struggles that kind of come with it. So if I think back of my failed scaling career, it sounds really strange, but I really like that grind of that routine that I had for such a long time. And in fact, I follow a lot of professional skaters these days, and when they retire, they actually have a really hard time. And what they say is not that they miss the medals and the glory moments, they actually miss the routine, that showing up at the ice rink every day for however many years. That's what they miss the most. So you really need to like the process, not just the outcome. And that is it for the formal slides part. I guess, as I mentioned before, I am writing on Substack frequently these days. I really love it. You can read more about some of these topics. I'm planning to write about this topic in particular a bit more. And if you are going through this journey or are about to or in the middle of it, it's the most rewarding and exciting journey. I hope I didn't scare you off because it is really amazing. Just remember you are in it for the long run. And yeah, I would love to hear from you and chat to you and hear about your challenges. So please feel free to reach out on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and share your stories and ask questions. I'd love to chat and exchange stories. And that is it. Over to Moriya.
We're in it for the long run. Loving it, loving it. Thank you so much. That was such a valuable and inspiring at the same time session. Thank you so much for that. Are you ready for our Q&A?
I am. Thank you so much for the feedback.
Happy to. So we are starting with Srishti. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. From India, an early PM with a decade of tech experience. Well, you're at the right place, learning how to master our domain. And we are moving to Filipa from Portugal. And she is managing an authentication and authorization platform that is used by several user applications. Great to meet you. And she is thanking you for waking up so early to talk to us. That's correct. Thank you very much for that. And
anytime.
I guess this is just a nickname an avatar use, but Tutu is asking, can you elaborate a little more on building a shared purpose?
Great question. Sharing a purpose is it's such a hard thing I found. And I wouldn't even say I'm perfect at it now either. I'm just better at it now than I was at the start because it's still a really hard thing to do. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges really in any leadership position. But I mean, some of the practical things you could do is, just having a yearly recap of what you have achieved and where what your purpose is. I like to do this at the end of the year. We often have a retrospective where we kind of look back, and then in the same session or following the session, I then like to share, this is what our next year will look like. These are our goals. Remember, this is our purpose. And there's something about the end of the year that I think, it's just a natural time of the year to reflect back and also to plan for the next year. Will be an interesting one this year, actually. Looking back onto 2020.
Interesting, challenging. You can use whatever word comes to your head, but yeah, it's going to be different. That's for sure. Thank you very much. Guys, I will give you a few more minutes to ask your questions because I want to make sure that you use this opportunity to get the best advice in the field. And Corinna, actually, I have a question of my own. You mentioned the stakeholders management, right? How to go over that, and I think it will be great if you could tell us a little bit more about the experience that you're now having when you were hired again to build another team. So this is like a little different in terms of the stakeholders management when you're doing it for the second time, and I would actually like to learn from your experience if you're up to share this with us.
Yeah, of course. Do you mean doing it now, being in such an early stage company again, or doing it now as in
yeah, like starting from kind of like from scratch again. but you have the experience of doing it for the second time, so
yeah
I hope it counts.
No, it certainly does. It's a great question. So I think I would still, I really think focusing on the doing was the right approach. I think it really worked for this early stage company. But I think there are definitely small things you can do to put a bit more focus on, the wider education. You can spread the word a little bit quicker, I think. One thing we are doing now is company-wide knowledge sharing sessions where, the design chapter would talk about this is what we do as designers and these are our processes and here's how we can help. And we do that the same for the other teams. And I think those would have definitely been a quick and easy or relatively easy things I could have done to spread the word, just inside the company. In terms of stakeholders, there's kind of two sides for me. Obviously, there's, internal Rome. I think I mentioned before, I was lucky that I had relatively good support. Our CEO and my boss, he was a product manager before at Skype, so he knew exactly, what the importance is of that role. So I think I was lucky in that sense. I know not everyone is that lucky. But yeah, so I mean, internally, it's really, whenever it comes up, you just need to kind of chip away and mention, hey, we're not just doing this, we can also help you with this. And it sounds so obvious, but you're not going to convince all the stakeholders with one speech or one statement or one thing that you do. It's all the things that you do, all the things that you say in every meeting that kind of add up to it. And over time, I always love, especially working with clients, actually, when we first engage with clients, they might not fully know what our product managers do. And it obviously takes a lot of education along the way. Again, in every meeting, we kind of have to expand on it and explain it. But I love that moment when they then start to actually, use your terminology and say, oh, can you help us with discovery and this? And that's really rewarding, but it does take time. It's not that one speech will ever solve it. So to your question, I think looking back, there's definitely a few small things like knowledge sharing within the company, or maybe more polished presentations of this is, what we do as product managers to external stakeholders and clients would have definitely helped accelerate it. But the second time around, I would still, I think, take the more doing approach rather than preaching.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. And Asaf has a very interesting question to ask, and is asking, what if you don't have the budget to hire? Can you give any tips on how to better leverage non-product managers to do product management work?
I love this.
Yeah, the $1 million question.
No, it's great. Actually, I have a couple of people in the team who have moved from development and QA roles into product management, and they have become fantastic product managers. And so there is, I think, a lot of overlap in the skills, obviously not all of it, but I think you can definitely find, help or parts of your role that can be supported by other roles potentially in your product team, right? If you have a strong QA tester, they can help you maybe with the definition of the requirements. They have this amazing level of detail. So if you're really struggling, you can't do all the things in your 8 hours a day, you could work out with them. Can they maybe help you with creating tickets? Or talk to your tech lead, can they support you a bit with sprint planning or grooming sessions, right? If they're happy to do it, that could be a good way to kind of bridge, this kind of emergency situation. But ultimately, I mean, yeah, talking about sustainable growth, it's not something I would recommend for the long term, because it really just, kind of patches a hole in the short term.
Yep, that's right. And actually, Philippa has kind of like a following up question on Asap's question. And she's asking, how would you facilitate the transition of someone else already in the company to the role of product manager instead of hiring? So we already talked about, who can we use for what, but I'm going to use Philippa's question to ask you if you have any experience or any feedback or tips or tricks on how to ease this transition, because as managers, this is a big part of what we do, right? We ease everyone's transition and work to make everyone happy and to make sure that they produce their best, the delivering product out there. So how can we actually make someone's life easier when we're asking them to do like product management related job when this is not the thing that they were hired to do in the first place?
Right. I think my answer would be there's no easy way. product management is hard, and I mentioned I have a couple people in the team who have transitioned, and I actually love talking to them because they've shared some really interesting observations with me, and they were like, I had no idea how hard this role is. So I'm not sure if I can say there's an easy way to do it. Let me think. I mean, it's really gradual
It's a
transition.
challenging one. It's a challenging one. I have no idea how to answer. If it was, addressed to me, I was in the same situation. I really don't know. And it also depends on the person, right? Because
it really does.
If we're talking about a developer and she's like really, into numbers and really like structured in the way she think, so maybe the things that will help her are different than the things that will help a designer who is more spiritual and likes to go out of the box, and he likes to have everything his way. So it also really depends on the people. But I think that Philippa's question, if to go back to it, if you are in the position as a manager when you need to ease the transition of a non-product manager management professional into the domain, and you are asking yourself how to ease this process for the person, you're already in the right starting point, right? Because you are aware of the challenge. You are aware of the fact that this is such a challenging domain with so many challenging tasks. So you are thinking about, you're doing your job because you are thinking about the people on your team, right? And you are aware of the task and the challenging that comes with it, as you know your domain very well. So that's the good starting point as a manager. And I think going back to all what you mentioned with like purpose and people, so as long as we're sticking to it and we know that the other people know why we are here, the other person knows why they were asked to do something that was different than their the role that they were hired to, or they are giving this opportunity that they asked for, right, to go a little bit into product management. So if we are communicating that with them, and if we are making sure that they know the purpose, why we're here, right? What are the goals? Going back to what you mentioned about documentation, right? Documents and having everything documented will ease everyone's job, because, they can spend, 30 minutes at the end of every day learning about our system, and they won't feel, sad and silly because they have to ask so many questions. So I think going back to everything that you mentioned, everything is so relevant, both if the people on our team are product managers with experience, or we are getting them into the field of product managers. We are the first experience that they have, as long as we keep an eye on all the structure and the points and the tips and the tricks that you mentioned. So I think that actually you got the right answer to Philippa. Yeah, it's just that everything is correct and relevant in both cases. And this was a really, really challenging and interesting question, right? Because it is a challenge.
Yeah, it
Definitely
is.
a challenge.
If I may just add to it, I fully agree with everything you said. And what could also help is, I think when you transition, one of the hardest parts is kind of to let go of your old role. And I think that happens actually really often. So I think it really helps if you set the expectation, you prepare, someone who's going through this transition, and tell them, look, this is going to put you outside of your comfort zone. And you just have to remember, you're not the tech lead anymore, right? It's someone else's job to make those decisions now, or it's someone else's job to test the product now. So prepare them for that, because that can, I find, often be the biggest kind of drag of that transition, right? It just makes it so much harder. So the more they can let go, okay, I'm in a different role now. There's this completely different responsibilities and a different mindset. That can really help as well. And then obviously with all the great tactical things you mentioned, having those templates and just being there, having those effective one-on-ones and supporting whoever's going through this transition. But I can tell you, it's actually really worth it.
Yeah,
It's really
sorry for
worth it.
jumping in, but yeah, it's
No,
exactly
sorry.
like what you mentioned before with the feedback, right? That they know what is expected of them. At the day and at the day something happens, and we're not waiting for review at the end of the year or the quarter or whatever it is to let them know what is both expected from them and what is not expected of them. So this is very good. Thank you very, very much. And there is a little different challenge, ask question from the audience, but I think it's an interesting one. What were the challenges that you encountered when you started as a product manager? The audience would love to know. A little different,
Well,
quite relevant.
yeah, no, it's great. Well, first of all, no one knew why I'm here. That was the very first thing, and I told the story as well of you know, the first kind of product I was meant to work on. You know, they didn't see that value as well. So that was really my biggest challenge at the very start. And then of course, you know, and I hear from a lot of other product managers that they are in a similar position for a while. You know, while you're by yourself, sometimes your work can really, really pile up. And at some point I was looking after 5 different products. And I think I had this aha moment of, you know, I was sending out these updates to stakeholders on one Friday, and I did 5 of them, and then I was like, okay, it's probably time to hire someone. So my biggest challenge was, well, firstly, you know, just being patient, I think, and chipping away at showing my value. There's nothing I could have said on the very first day that would have changed that. It was really getting stuck in and showing, hey, can I help you with this? Or oh, I can do this timelines for you, and I can do this, and just slowly gaining that trust. And just being patient with that was probably the hardest part for me as well.
Soft skills are hard to manage.
That's
Thank
right.
you very much for that. And may I challenge you with another question, just to close our session with?
Of course, go for it.
Happy to. So we are product professionals, and one of the key elements of good product management is to prioritize. So if I have to ask you to choose one of the things that we discussed today, one of the things that really you put it like first place for everyone to think about tomorrow morning when they open the laptop and they set their new work day, what this thing will be. And I'll give you some time to think, because I want to ask the audience to make sure that they like both this video and our channel or page. It depends on the platform that you are using for watching us right now, because we want to stay in touch with you and we want to invite you to future awesome events like this one. So, Corinna, if I have to choose one thing from all the valuable and important things that we discussed today, what is the one thing that you would like everyone to think about tomorrow morning?
Oh, that's
I
such a
told you it's
hard
a
one.
challenge. I asked if you're ready for a challenge. I wasn't kidding.
No, you weren't. Really support your team. Ultimately, be there for your team. Just think about that. Don't get too stuck on the technical skills and what you know or don't know. Just be a supportive team leader, because growing a team is hard. So be nice to you, be nice to your teammates, and support them throughout this.
I love it. I love it. Thank you very, very much, Corinna Stukan, VP Product at Rome. It has been a pleasure, really a pleasure to have you here with us, to learn from your experience, to learn from the process that you have and had, both past and current, and to learn about the differences between what you're going through right now and, in the past, and just an amazing, amazing, amazing opportunity for all of us to kind of like use a case study and learn from you how to be better managers of other product managers, and to inspire product managers on how to grow into the position where they manage other product managers, and how to do it with the right set of passion and clarity, and focus on people, and focus on the things that really help the team to deliver at the end and be happy and satisfied with the product. So thank you so much. I hope that you had as much fun as I had.
Oh, I did. Thank you so much for having me. This was so good. I really enjoyed it.
The pleasure is mine, and I can't wait to have you here again on this exact stage talking about another subject.
I'd love to.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.